I'm pausing here for just a moment. All right. So once again, just to summarize where I was, because I realize now that one of my streaming line pieces here wasn't properly connected. So we're focusing today on a very important topic, which is, can leadership be taught? Is leadership something that you can develop? So no matter where you're calling it, wherever you're checking it out from, whether you're on TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, thank you for being here. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. Please comment, please engage. The more I hear from you, the better. So again, I'm going to back up just a little bit in the interest of making sure that those who didn't see the introductory elements don't lose that. Okay, so please bear with me for a second. So this is I want this to be an open conversation. I want everybody to feel comfortable in having this conversation. So please be open. Please feel comfortable sharing your concerns. And honestly, the more open you are, the more I think you're going to gain from our time together. So the question, can leadership be taught? Some people say, no, it's a born skill. Either you got it or you don't. I don't believe that. We'll talk about why, but I think that that's an important thing to put there right off the bat. Can leadership be taught or not? And if you don't have those leadership skills, can you develop them? That's another question, right? Because oftentimes people rise through the ranks and they were a team member, now they become team leader, or they were mid-level manager, now they become executive. They get promoted often because they're really good at what they do, but they don't necessarily get promoted for their leadership skills. And the question is, can you develop those, right? So we need to understand what leadership actually is, how you develop it, what opportunities you have for growth, and then, we could really unpack this. And I think that if we can handle or tackle these 4 primary truths associated with leadership, powerful truths that will address this question of whether leadership can be taught, that's going to frame our conversation and really help all of us to step into leadership in a more meaningful and purposeful way. So number 1, right, here's an important truth I want you to get. Leadership is less about personality, and it's more about patterns. It's more about disciplines. It's more about your daily activities and how you show up in the world, right? Because oftentimes we think Hollywood has taught us, or social media seems to teach us, that great leaders are type A. They're bold, they're confident, they step into things without hesitation. That's not really the classic leader. If you look at most leaders, they're not that way. They wouldn't necessarily star on a Hollywood set, right? They do better in a quieter, more subdued type of way. So it's not about a type, right? We're not necessarily confident, bold, charismatic. Yes, you could have those qualities, but that's not necessarily what defines a leader. Effective leaders can be of all types and stripes. So how you show up matters. And by the way, I would argue that being consistent in how you show up in many ways is more important than the actual how you show up. And the reason I say that is because people need to know that you are predictable. They need to know that if they present something to you, they have a sense of how you're going to react. If you show up differently all the time, that creates a lack of settlement. In other words, people are not as settled and as comfortable in interacting with you. And also, I would say that if you have a particular style of leadership, let people know about it. For example, when I started as head of school, my inclination was to close the door. I'm more introverted. I like when I have quiet and space. That's where I do my best work. And so people weren't used to that. They were used to my predecessor, who had an open door policy and was very active and open for people at all times. So stylistically, it was very different, and it turned some people off. They didn't really know what to do with me, and I needed to educate them in how to work with me. Not that they had to adjust to me for its own sake. It wasn't an ego thing. It was purely a matter of helping people understand what allows me to show up in the very best way for them, is the way I meant to say it. Okay, so consistency is important. But coming back to the main point, when we talk about patterns, everything that we do in leadership, for the most part, can be taught, can be developed. You can practice. You could develop different habits. You could start to show up differently. You can get feedback. You could adjust to the feedback, right? Self-awareness can be built. Emotional intelligence can be strengthened. Many of us are not so emotionally intelligent right off the bat. In other words, we don't have that as a natural gift. It wasn't developed in us when we were younger, but now we have to develop it if we want to show up as a great leader. If we want to be more strategic than we've been in the past, that can also be developed. It doesn't have to be a naturally strategic. Yeah, it's great when you have these qualities, but if somebody believed in you, if you got promoted, there's a good chance that you have those skills. You might just need to work them through a little bit more. Okay, so that's number one. Now let's talk about number two. Experience alone doesn't create leaders. Reflection does. Now, I will tell you, experience really does help. There's no question about it. When you've experienced things in the past, it's going to set you up for greater success in the future. That said, if you're experiencing things but you're not reflecting on it, the experience is going to be worth a lot less. You might be familiar with the 10,000-hour rule that Malcolm Gladwell popularized from the research of Erik Erikson. What actually came out of that research is that the very, very best in the world, the classic violinist, the opera singer, anyone who you might imagine an athlete who is much greater or has a higher level of achievement than anyone else, they usually say that it's about 2,000 hours of additional practice, from 8,000 from the very good to 10,000 of the exceptional. But it's not just the 2,000 hours, and this is where the misnomer often comes in. It's 2,000 hours of focused practice. When you practice and you're focused and you have specific things you're trying to accomplish with that practice, then the practice will serve you and you will be stronger and better as a result. Okay? So it's about reflection. It's about thinking about, am I doing it right? How did this land? What was the response? What else could I do? Is there a different way for me to consider this the next time? I remember, for example, when I used to run meetings with my faculty, it was like a whole to-do list, and I would kind of walk through my list, item after item. Let's talk about this and this and this and this. It almost felt like it was one directional. And I decided that I needed the meetings to be more engaging. I wanted to involve the teachers and the rest of the team. I didn't want it just to be the world according to me, that kind of thing. And so what I did was I changed the style of the meeting. I gave everybody the good and welfare in advance, the announcements, these kinds of things. And during the meetings themselves, we focused exclusively on growth, whether it was policy, important decisions, reinforcing professional development that we had focused on earlier on in the year. That allowed everyone to engage in the subject matter and to feel really good about what we were trying to build and accomplish. It's the same concept. Be reflective, get feedback, ask hard questions, and be willing to ask questions about your own performance. Be willing to find out, is it landing? Is it resonating with people? Right? Should I be doing it differently? How else can I do it to make sure that everybody feels connected, involved, and engaged? Right? Important questions that oftentimes we're afraid to ask or we don't think to ask. Right? They study what went well, and they also study what didn't, and they course correct as appropriate. Okay? It's not like you hand somebody a rule book. This is what every leader needs. That may be like a 1950s, 1960s approach. We don't work with that because that ultimately isn't how we are. We're humanity, all types and stripes. Right? I'm a former educator, so I know that in every classroom, you've got different kinds of learners, and you need to adapt to those different learners. The workplace is the same concept, right? You need to adapt to the different personalities that you have with you. You need to be able to meet them at their level, give them what they need, ask for feedback, and then correct accordingly. And that feedback will make a huge difference in terms of your growth. So that was number two. Now, here's truth number three. And that is that leadership is built in small moments, not just big ones. So it's not the huge presentation from the stage in front of thousands of people. It's not the massive company-wide conference call or something similar. Those do certainly frame how people view the leader. But for the most part, leadership is the day-to-day stuff. It's the smaller investments. It's the check-ins. It's the follow-throughs. It's the clarifications, right? So it's about being honest even when things are uncomfortable, being willing to say what needs to be said, doing it, of course, in a judicious and appropriate way, but not hiding from it. Listening, being a great listener, not just reacting, not just telling. Admitting when you're wrong, it's a huge one. I cannot emphasize this one enough. And I spent so much time learning about this, right? As I was in the cauldron, as I was in the process of just trying to be a better school leader, admitting when you're wrong. In my case, one of the main things I did wrong was I tried to fast track change. I thought I had a change mandate from the board, from the community, from many people on staff and parents. But I ultimately realized that change has to be managed properly. You can't just run in like a bull in a china shop unless it's a crisis. For the most part, you have to be careful and you have to build relationships, because if you have strong relationships, then you can implement change that lasts. You can get people on board, you can get them behind you, which I didn't know nearly as well as I should have when I first got started. So admitting that I made a mistake, admitting that I'm going to try to do things differently. Another example is lifting others even when you're under pressure. So often we're under pressure, right? Stress for us and for others usually starts with us. When we're stressed and we create stressful conditions for other people, that can be exceedingly difficult. But if you learn to lift people up, if you learn to take the stress off of them, first of all, by lowering the temperature, by having confidence that things will work out, and by communicating that to other people, then you are building your leadership profile, even in those moments where it's just a small conversation, a small reaction. It doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to think like, I need to make a massive impression, a massive imprint on the team or on the company, on the organization for me to arrive as a leader. It's not the way it works. You arrive through the daily investments, through the daily actions that you take. Once again, wherever you are watching this, on whatever platform, please comment, please share your questions. What's resonating with you? What isn't? I want to hear from you, and I certainly want to be able to respond. And so we are now up to number 4. Okay, we're up to number 4. What's the final truth? That final truth is that leadership teaching only works when you're willing to be transformed, which means, yes, to answer our original question, yes, leadership can be taught, but teaching, as we know, only works when the learner is willing to learn, right? I talk to teachers about this often, right? You can say that you delivered a great lesson, but did the students learn the information? And that's true for the workplace too, right? It's great to say I gave a wonderful PowerPoint, I shared what needed to be shared, my email was very detailed and whatever it is, but the learner has to learn it. And so for our purposes, if you're the learner as the leader, then you have to ask yourself, are you open to what leadership entails? Are you willing to do the hard work and to make the changes necessary to really grow into your leadership position? And when you're considering people as leaders, besides for looking at their core skill set, their charisma and confidence and knowledge of the material or the subject matter and all the things we've been talking about, are they people who are growth oriented? Are they people who will, over time, be open to changing and to taking the next step? Because if they're close to that, if they think that they've arrived, it's going to be exceedingly difficult to move them to the next level. So, yeah, you could talk about mindset, you could teach strategies, you can give them tools, but if their ego is in a bad place, if their ego is so big that they're not open to the possibility of learning new things, it's going to be uphill sledding, that's for sure. So you want to find people who are sufficiently confident in their own skin that they're able to say, I don't know everything, and I'm willing to admit that, and I'm willing to be vulnerable to other people to learn from them. That's what true leadership, I think, is, and true greatness is. Okay? If you enter the leadership process, not with what can I get from it, right? Increased salary or benefits, having people do some of the things you didn't want to do in the past, the recognition and the credit and all of that. If you come in with a me first mindset, typically speaking, you will underperform. It will not be the experience that you wanted, and you will feel empty on the back end. If, however, you go into leadership with an others first mentality, how can I serve? How can I become better? How do I see this as a growth opportunity? Because now I really have to refine the skills and improve the character that I maybe was able to hide until this point in time, but now it's going to show. Because so many more people are looking at me, so many more people are leaning on me. I can't just pretend to have everything figured out. I have to be able to do my very best and share that I'm not going to be perfect, and to ask for the feedback that you need. Leaders who are willing to do that are the ones who typically excel. So I want to pause here for a moment, and I want to ask you, what do you think? Did I make a compelling argument that leadership can be taught? Or do you feel that I'm wrong? Do you feel that leadership is something you either have or you don't have? Have you ever seen somebody that you didn't think would be a good leader and they surprised you? They stepped into leadership and they were able to go beyond what you thought that their natural talents would limit them to, right? Have you been in a leadership position? Have you had an experience where you felt like you didn't have it all figured out, but over time you were able to figure out more because you were open to learning and because you were open to admitting that not everything was exactly so when you first got started? So I'll definitely be looking for comments over here. I want to hear from you, because remember, we don't grow by assuming that everybody is ready-made. If that's the assumption, then there's no opportunity for growth. We call that a fixed mindset. And people with a fixed mindset are more reluctant to grow because they don't want to upset the picture that they have of themselves and that others have of them. But a fixed mindset is very limiting. And the very best leaders, as well as the very best anything, are not people with fixed mindsets. They're people who challenge the status quo, who are willing to work on themselves, and through coaching and through effort and through honesty, they got more out of their experiences than they would have otherwise. Okay, so again, looking around here for comments or questions, see if there's anything that I can respond to as I check it out on different platforms over here. Okay, so with that, we're going to move into our conclusion. So the question, one more time: can leadership be taught? The answer, it can. Absolutely yes. But it's contingent on your willingness to grow. A person who is willing to learn, a person who's willing to make adjustments, is ultimately going to become a better leader. You may never be the best, but you're going to be better than you were. And that's really the goal that we should have for ourselves. My goal shouldn't be the very best who ever walked the face of the earth. My goal should be to be better than I was before, and to be sufficiently good to meet the needs of my people. So it's not about your personality. It is about your mindset, your approach to communication, your approach to all forms of upskilling, and your courage as well as your openness to say, I don't know everything. Please help me become better. Please help me help you. That's often the way I like to look at it. So it doesn't happen overnight, but with time, with intention, with reflection, and with consistency, a very important word, you will get there. It's not something you have, it's something that you are continually becoming, right? Focus on the journey, not the destination, because nobody ever fully arrives at leadership. And even if you feel you're there, tomorrow you might not be there anymore, right? Being on top of the world, it's not like you get to a podium, to a platform, and then you're done. It's not like a race. It's not a linear progression. There are ups and downs. We have better days and lesser days. But the people that are consistent tend to deliver. And the people that are inconsistent usually Don't. So keep learning, keep stretching, keep leading forward. Don't worry about being perfect, just be purposeful. Keep being humble, keep asking for feedback. And if you do these things, you will have a much more fulfilling leadership experience and you will help so many more people show up as their very best selves. So, last check over here for comments before we wrap up this recording. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for your time, for your attention, for your interest. And let's remember that great leaders are not born, they are built through humility, through open mindedness, through a growth mindset, through a lot of courage, and through a commitment to being the very best leader that they could be. Have a fantastic day, and please stay in touch.